Hello and welcome to this poetry comparison webinar. We have three key learning aims, three key takeaways. First of all, to understand the poem Half-Caste. Secondly, to understand the poem Search for My Tongue. And finally, to compare the poem Search for My Tongue and Half-Caste. This is for a specific assignment and a specific title, which is to compare how the two poets present ideas about identity. Now, when we talk about how, it's very much about methods, looking at the different things they use in their poetry to present ideas about identity. Now, they are very different poems, but there are great similarities. The first poem, Half-Caste by John Agar, is very much about identity. It's about how he's being labelled half-caste. Now, it's very difficult perhaps for us to understand this particular label because there was a racial slur with this label. Perhaps it came from the time where Black people and white people weren't supposed to marry, weren't supposed to be together, and therefore the offspring of these marriages were called half-caste, and there was some kind of degrading or insulting idea behind this label. So the whole of the poem takes an objection to this label, this idea that he's called half-caste. Now, perhaps people would say it politely because you don't know what to call someone. You might say mixed race, mixed heritage. What do you call someone? But I think the poem is really challenging labels in general. Don't call me anything. Get to know me, understand who I am. Don't just slap a label on me. Don't just judge me by my appearance. Don't just judge me by the color of my skin. Go deeper than that. So John Agar, when he presents this, when he performs this, does it so beautifully, and you can hear the Creole, the Caribbean rhythm and tune, and the poetry and the musicality and the lyricism. So I will attempt to read the poem, and then we'll talk about some of the key aspects about identity that he looks at in this poem from my perspective. So excuse me, I'm not John Agar, but I'll have a go at reading this poem. Half-Caste by John Agar. Excuse me, standing on one leg, I'm half-caste. Explain yourself. What you mean when you say half-caste? You mean when Picasso mixed red and green is a half-caste canvas? Explain yourself. What do you mean when you say half-caste? You mean when light and shadow mix in the sky is a half-caste weather? Well, in that case, England weather nearly always half-caste. In fact, some of them cloud half-caste to them overcast. So spiteful, them don't want the sun past our us. Explain yourself. What do you mean when you say half-caste? You mean Tchaikovsky sit down at the piano and mix a black key with a white key is a half-caste symphony? Explain yourself. What do you mean? Listening to you with my keen half of my ear. Listening to you, looking at you with the keen half of my eye. And when I'm introduced to you, I'm sure you'll understand why I offer you half a hand. And when I sleep at night, I close half a eye. Consequently, when I dream a dream, I dream half a dream. And when moon begin to glow, I, half-caste human being, cast half a shadow. But you must come back tomorrow with the whole of your eye, and the whole of your ear, and the whole of your mind, and I will tell you the other half of my story. Okay, I'm no John Agar, so forgive that rendition of the poem. It's very much, you can see it's very much about identity. He's taking objection to being labeled, and that's all they see. He's saying you have to see past the skin color. You have to see past the fact that I, the poet, is from a mixed heritage, a mixed background. He's standing on one leg. Excuse me, standing on one leg. Can you see how the mocking, ironic tone is introduced. Standing on one leg. We know flamingos stand on one leg. Standing on one leg, again, is that sense of insecurity. By giving someone this label, you're making them insecure rather than being firm and sure-footed. He's standing on one leg. It's that sense of imbalance because he's not being judged for the full of who he is. He's just being judged on his skin color as his identity. And then you've got that repetition, you've got that anaphoric, that's that kind of repetition at the beginning of the sentence. Explain yourself. What do you mean? It's kind of accusative. It's getting the reader to consider, what does it mean to be mixed? Mixed, when you mix green and red. And we know that Picasso, even now, is a celebrated artist because he was unique and clever. He did all sorts of things on the canvas that were imaginative, and he saw human form and different shapes in abstract ways that really played with your mind and forced you to think. So using Picasso, mixing different colors is saying that these racial identities that are from different backgrounds will force you to reconsider and force you to think about what it means to be creative and what beauty is. Then he talks about the weather using natural imagery, talking about the sky and the sun and clouds. Is really thinking that mix is natural. It's not something unnatural, being from dual heritage, mixed heritage. It's something like the English weather. The English weather is half-caste because it's always sunshine and rain and cloud and all the different types of seasons in one day. And therefore it's something natural and something typically British. So me, the poet, being half-caste, I'm natural, I'm typically British. Comparing it with the weather is really giving that idea of naturalness. And then he talks about Tchaikovsky sitting, and then obviously it's very visual, black and white keys. So he's talking about racial identity, mixing of the two races, but it creates this incredible symphony. And again, like Picasso, he's a recognized cultural figure, a real master, creating masterpieces, these symphonies that have different shades, they have different movements, they're long, they're complex, they're interesting. It's not just one level. And again, he's saying with racial identity, we're complex, we're interesting. You can't just judge us, you have to listen and really understand, because a symphony has all these different movements. And then it's mocking and ironic again, saying that as a half-caste human being, he's only sleeping with one half eye open and only dreaming half a dream and only casting half a shadow. And this is suggesting that when you look at people with only thinking about their racial identity, you're denying them the power of dreams. You're denying them the impact that they can have in the world, a full shadow, a full identity. So then the advice at the end with those imperatives is that you must come back, the modal verb, you must come down back with the whole of your eye, your ear, your mind. So that means that don't just be limited, don't just think in a closed way about race, really understand race and identity in a fuller, more complex way, like modern art, like symphonies, like the weather, things that are unpredictable and complex. And that's what his racial identity is, unpredictable and complex. So then we're going to look at the next poem, which is Search for My Tongue. Again, another warning, another apology. When you hear the poet reading and you can hear the Gujarati, I can't even say it well, you can hear the beauty of the language really spilling confidently from her mouth. So I will try and read this poem. I am not the poet, I'm not Sujata Bhatt, but I will have a go to read this poem and then we'll talk about it before we go into the second part of the webinar, which is to compare the poems together. Search for my tongue, Sujata Bhatt. You ask me what I mean by saying I've lost my tongue. I ask you, what would you do if you had two tongues in your mouth and lost the first one, the mother tongue, and could not really know the other, the foreign tongue? You could not use them both together, even if you thought that way. And if you lived in a place you had to speak a foreign tongue, your mother tongue would rot and die in your mouth until you had to spit it out. I thought I spit it out, but overnight, while I dream, Mune hutakai aki jib akai basha, me thunakai nakichai, paruntu ratre vnum pana mari basha pachi avachai, funi j mari basha narajib muntai kilache, funi j mari basha marijib mundhaba pate che. It grows back, a stamp of a shoot, grows longer, grows moist, grows strong veins. It ties the other tongue in knots. The bud opens in my mouth. It pushes the other tongue aside. Every time I think I've forgotten, I think I've lost the mother tongue, it blossoms out of my mouth. So I'm sorry about the Gujarati. I hope that some of it was vaguely recognizable. So you can see this is again quite a direct poem. Talking to the reader, you ask me what I mean by lost my tongue. So losing the tongue is physical and metaphorical. Your tongue is all about your speech, your ability to express yourself. So if you lose your tongue, and you may have heard of that idiom, has the cat got your tongue, when someone's very quiet, and you lose your tongue, you can't express yourself clearly, or you are silent. So she's saying, I feel like I've lost my tongue, because she's moved to England. She's moved to a foreign country for herself. She's moved away from her homeland and lost her mother tongue. And she's saying, this is what it feels like. It feels as if I can't use both tongues. I have to neglect the other one, and it rots and dies. Her identity is dead. Her connection with her old life and her home is dead. And yet the new tongue, the foreign tongue, her ability to express herself in English isn't developed. So she's stumped somehow. She can't express herself. She can't really be part of an effectively active participant in the new culture. But it grows back. Her connection with her past, her connection with her culture, her confidence and her original self grows back. So although she can't use the foreign tongue and she can't speak English well, she hasn't lost her confidence. She hasn't lost her self-expression. She hasn't lost her identity. So it's that struggle, really, of being able to make herself understand in a new culture. Okay, let's have a look at both the poems together. Now, I like to talk about the hanger comparison method when we talk about comparison. The hanger method really shows that you talk about both. Both these poems do this, but then you can separate out and talk about one poem and then the other. So you can talk about both, the similarities, and then you can talk about one and then the other, the differences. So the hanger methods help us to talk about the similarities and the differences. So what is similar? Well, they both use enjambment. So in the poetry, they don't stop neatly in every line. They use enjambment. Why? Because in Half-Caste, the idea is that it's confrontational. He wants to really ask readers to think about their prejudice and how they judge people simply on the color of their skin and their appearance. They think they know them. So the enjambment is showing this debate and this argument. And at the start, it says, what do you mean? So it's really taking the reader to task and getting them to assess their own prejudice. And then in the middle, you've got these ironic explanations and this mocking tone. It's that sense of anger that they're not recognize the beauty, like in Picasso and with Tchaikovsky, the beauty of the mix of cultures. And then the end is that invitation, you must come back tomorrow to reconnect, to think really clearly about culture in a bigger way than just a stereotype. Search My Tongue also uses enjambment to show that restlessness, that sense of rootlessness and the frustration, but also to show that beautiful lyricism in the middle of the poem when it's all in Gujarati. So she starts with that kind of frustration, that anger. You ask me, what do I mean? What do I mean? It's that idea that her culture is beginning to disappear because she's not welcome and she's not familiar or successful in the new culture. But in the middle of the poem, the Gujarati is expressive and lyrical and songlike, and her tongue rejuvenates. And you can hear it. It's a rhyme, it's rhyming, it's repetitive, it's beautiful, it's hypnotic. And by the end, we have the sense of accomplishment. It's her tongue and her identity is not static. It's evolving, it's shifting, it's not fixed. And the enjambment reflects that. Both of these poems use repetition. The repetition in Half-Caste forces the reader to examine their stereotypes. It forces them to think, well, there must be more. It's the other half of the story. There's hidden depths between the layers of skin. There's more to racial identity than just the color of the skin. And the repetition in Search My Tongue is all about beauty and strength. Grows back. Her identity, the beauty and the strength of her identity grows back. You've got the juxtaposition of that in feeling intimidated at the beginning, and then that intimacy, that reconnection with her culture at the end. Both of them don't use standard English. So in Half-Caste, he uses Creole, that patois, or them talking in the middle about the clouds. Some of them cloud, half-cast, they'll them overcast. Is celebrating his culture, connecting with the culture, this sense of pride. And then also the Gujarati, it's not English, Mune, Hute K, is again reconnecting with, again, like a sense of celebration and pride in that culture, in that identity. Both of them use second person address. In Half-Caste, it's kind of this assertive voice that's commanding, explain yourself, that sense of anger and disapproval. But this one, it's that, what would you do? It's seeking empathy with someone who has this confusion, perhaps this dual identity, coming from one place and going to another nationality. Both of them use quite powerful imagery. In Half-Caste, it's the imagery of iconic artistic and musical figures like Picasso and Tchaikovsky to really celebrate these beautiful masterpieces of creativity that are mixed race people. In Search My Tongue, you've got this death imagery that's rot and spit and die. It's really about the harsh brutality of her trying to assert herself in a new culture, but she's feeling silenced and rejected and marginalized. She's got no voice and she can't be heard. Both of them use metaphors. In Half-Caste, it's that extended, it's that metaphor, sorry, of dreams and shadows, and the shadow of the clouds and the dream. It's almost that sense of being incomplete or inferior, lacking impact and influence, and their potential is limited because society is just seeing them in one way. And the extended metaphor of this flower, this plant that kind of rots and then re-blossoms and grows and opens, is this natural cycle, the cycle of immigration, the loss of identity, and then the re-identification with the mother culture. Both of them use anatomical references. In Half-Caste, they talk about the hand, the ear, the eye, but also the mind. So they're talking that we have to look at deeper than just skin deep. And the anatomical reference, obviously, in Search My Tongue is the tongue. You've got this conflicting feeling of identity and the problems of bilingualism. It's really hard in a new culture to speak two languages. It's really difficult in a foreign setting to express yourself. It's really worrying when you're somewhere new to really find your voice. So we can see finally overall that both of these poems are really yearning for self-expression and yearning to express their identity. In the first poem, in Search for My Tongue, sorry, in Half-Caste, the first poem, it's really this protest. It's talking about shallow judgments. There's that anger that people are not more receptive, and it's really challenging people to open their minds to cultural identity. And for Search My Tongue, there is a really sad and yearning tone at the beginning, where it's that experience of immigration and feeling overwhelmed and marginalized and insecure. But at the end, there's that sense of triumphant, that she's managed to reconnect with her home and trying to kind of marry and merge those two cultures. Now, I hope that has helped you to understand the two poems separately and to compare them. And I hope that that's helped you to feel confident about writing them. Thank you for joining me, and see you next time. Goodbye.